The word mobility has become quite the trend in the health and fitness industry. But what is the difference between flexibility and mobility? Of course, these are just terms, and it's what we associate with these terms is what's important. So when we talk about flexibility, we talk about a passive endeavor, or for example, how much range of motion you have at a joint passively. And by passive, I mean that you have no control over that range of motion. So for example, you need gravity or weights or a partner or something external to your own body to get you into that range of motion. Using this straight leg raise as an example, you can clearly see that Mark is the one that's pushing my leg up into hip flexion, which means it's down to how much flexibility I have in my hamstrings and calves is going to be the limiting factor here. Although flexibility is still marketed today to improve things like sports performance, posture, injury prevention, and even pain, actually recent research has shown the opposite to be true, and that increase in range of motion without adequate control within that range has actually been shown to increase the chance of injury. This is because your stretch tolerance or your stretch reflex, which is essentially what determines how much flexibility you have, is your brain's way of trying to keep you safe. For example, if you can't control the bottom of the middle splits, then your brain isn't going to give you access to that range because it's fearful that you can't get out of it, or when you do get into it, you're going to hurt or injure yourself. If your brain feels threatened in a range of motion, then of course it's not going to give you access to it. So people become more flexible through long bouts of passive or static stretching, like in yoga for example, which over time alters the stretch tolerance or the stretch reflex, and hence you become more flexible. However, what we find is a lot of times this can actually be creating more harm than good. Mobility, on the other hand, is the combination of flexibility and strength. And by strength, I don't just mean being able to hold a static pose, I mean being able to generate force in that range. By being able to generate force in that range of motion, your brain feels safer and it feels like you've got more control over that range. As a byproduct, this also means that you gain access to them ranges much quicker than what you would through passive stretching alone. So still using the same range of motion as we showed earlier passively, this time I'm now moving into the range of motion actively by using my hip flexors and quads to pull my leg up into hip flexion. Notice I'm keeping my pelvis stable, keeping my knees straight, and I'm using the tissue on the front side of my thigh to control and pull myself into that range. There are, however, many other forms of stretching than just passive stretching alone. Things like contract, relax, PNF, weighted stretching, ballistic stretching, or dynamic stretching. All of these stretches have their own individual benefits, and it's more down to the context and the specific individual as to which would be more appropriate. The biggest takeaway is that becoming stronger across a larger range of motion will carry many more benefits than just passive or static stretching alone. We find that a combination of specific stretching and specific strength protocols that's more appropriate to use an individual will carry the greatest results. So hopefully that's cleared some information up for some of you. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and if you have any comments, write them down below and let's get moving.